Sean Haney and Justin Funk here with RealAgristudies. We're going to talk about some new results we have in regards to farmers' concern or lack of concern when it comes to consolidation that's happening in the ag sector. Hey, Justin, this is a really important topic, top of mind for a lot of farmers. And there's some really interesting findings in this report from an intake that we did in July connected to our Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index.
Yeah, you bet. I've been working in this industry now for 22 years, and I've seen a lot of consolidation myself. And, I'm not sure we've really ever asked the farmer their true opinion on this. And so this is giving us some insight into what Canadian farmers truly think about this issue that clearly impacts them. Before we go any further, just a technical note, 593 farmers participated in this survey. So we're looking at some statistical accuracy here within plus or minus 4%. Let's get started. First question that we asked out of the gate was, are you concerned about consolidation in the Canadian agriculture industry? And, rarely do you have such conclusive findings, but in this case, 90% of respondents said, yes, I am concerned about this.
Yeah, and I really didn't have a prediction of what this number would be, but if you're to ask a high level question like this, it's sort of like, yeah, I'm concerned. And that's why we went, we're going to get to some of the deeper questions that explain in terms of how people got to this 90% sort of resounding result.
Yeah. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you isn't the next question we asked. It was actually the last question we asked, but I'm going to bring this right up to the front of our discussion. We asked, well, what do you think should be done about it? You're concerned about it. Well, what are some potential solutions? So we asked respondents to select the best response, okay, what they felt was the best response to consolidation. So as you can see, very, very close, within a margin error, statistical tie here, stronger teeth to the Competition Bureau or attraction of new competitors where applicable. Those were the two most commonly referenced best options. And then the other options, which of course we presented to the audience, let the free market operate or more government intervention. You can see more government intervention clearly is not the farmer's preferred response to consolidation.
Yeah, and we do see government interference. Like think about when was it Potash Corp in Saskatchewan was going to be bought out by an Australian company? The Saskatchewan government got involved. So we do sometimes see the government say this is a strategic asset. This is a no. That can happen. Definitely a pretty low response from farmers on that being a solution. I found it interesting the stronger teeth to the Competition Bureau being the number one at 38%. Some people will be critical and say that a lot of times it's a rubber stamp. And there needs to be more no's that are put out there. It's a tough job the Competition Bureau has to go through all that. If you think back to the last wave of seed and crop protection mergers, one of the things that happened, remember the Bayer Monsanto merger that took place? Bayer was forced as a part of that Competition Bureau evaluation. That's why Bayer shed the Invigor canola asset and BSF picked it up. That was all part of that play to try to kind of maintain a competitive balance in the marketplace. I think for Canada, it's really tough with option number two. Attraction of new competitors where applicable. It sounds great to have more competitors, but one of the challenges is the population, right? It's a situation where we only have 40 million Canadians in total. Agriculture is a very small part of that population. It is an important part of the economy, but it can be difficult to try to just attract companies to come here, especially when you think about, like, say, Ontario. You got, what is it, like 3-4 million acres of corn. That's like smaller than most of the states in the U.S. when it comes to crop production. So we'll see what happens in this. And we got questions on Viterra and Bunge here in a sec or in a little bit. But stronger teeth of the Competition Bureau. That all depends also on the political sentiment and if people are going to crack down on antitrust and things like that. So interesting responses.
Yeah, you bet. So the next thing we wanted to learn more about was the impact that consolidation is having on farmers. And so here we presented them with a series of different sectors of the industry. So equipment dealerships, fertilizer manufacturers, ag retailers, etc. And from here, the respondent had to identify whether it was a negative impact, no impact, or could have a positive impact in some cases. So I put these in the order of significance with respect to negative impact. So equipment dealerships, 66% of farmers said that the consolidation in the local equipment dealership landscape had a negative impact on them. And I know that you just put an article out about this on RealAg's website. So definitely people should refer to that to get a little bit more insight. The next most concerning or negative impact was with fertilizer manufacturers and wholesalers. And of course, we've recently seen that in the past couple of years. And then ag retailers. And, you take a look at all of these really impact the farmers day to day, so to speak. And so I can understand why there would be a higher percentage of those indicating a negative impact for those particular areas. Just to round this out, then we got the seed and chemical companies, again, high level of negative impact, grain companies. Then we get to ag tech and precision ag. Well, first of all, not all farmers are engaged in that. And so you would expect to see maybe not quite as strong negative impact there. And similar animal nutrition companies, I would presume that either people answered this who had livestock and weren't impacted by it, or they weren't impacted because they didn't have livestock. We can dig into that data a little bit deeper, but for right now, this is, you can see where the majority of the impact seems to rest, and that is with those first five sectors of the industry.
Yeah, and I would argue in terms of ag tech, precision ag companies, one of the sort of perceptions I have here is we haven't had the wave of consolidation yet. We've still got a lot of startups running. Of course, we've got some of the big players out there, and some companies have come and gone, but we haven't seen like that sort of that collection of assets necessarily that we've seen, for example, like we've seen in equipment dealerships. So people, that doesn't surprise me that people don't feel affected, because I'm not sure we have really seen a heightened level of that consolidation trend in that sector. I mentioned the Viterra Bunge. That's going to get a lot of attention when it comes to grain companies, for sure. Seed and chemical companies, I'm not sure how we could consolidate further, right? Like especially from a crop protection standpoint, we've kind of like, if we have another wave of consolidation, I'm not sure how it happens with the current players, like maybe external players that enter to make some of those acquisitions. And ag retail, this is one where there's a lot of personal relationship with your ag retail. I know you do a lot of work, Justin, in that relationship between that ag retail salesperson and the farmer. This is one where there is ease of entry. Like the barrier to create more competition is much lower in ag retail than it is, say, in fertilizer manufacturers, right? I can put up a phase 3 shed and get an ID number, and I'm an agronomist, I'm advising, and I can sell some product. I may not be huge, may have trouble making any sort of margin with that kind of a low volume, but I can enter the industry. That's not possible with equipment dealerships or fertilizer manufacturers. And I think the big piece with equipment dealerships is the service factor. Why people are concerned. So, and I refer to this in the article, is that people unable to get a competitive bid on the same type of machine, right? They have to, if they're going to get competitive bids, they got to go cross brand. And the other piece is the service component, is trying to get a timely service when they need it. How far do I have to drive for parts? I think that's where a lot of that concern comes when it comes to equipment dealerships that, mind you, has been really pushed by the manufacturers. The manufacturers have played a big role in that consolidation in the dealership model.
Yeah, we didn't ask what are you impacted by, and there's just a limitation to what we're capable of doing in a short survey like this. But it'd be nice to know. So if you said a negative impact, what are you most concerned about? My guess is that for some of these, you're going to find very rational reasons, like what you just said about the service capability and things like that. On the ag retailer side, it might be a little bit more of an emotional negative impact. Just I don't want to have to make a change. So anyway, maybe that will be a subject for another survey at one point in time.
Well, and here's the other piece of that, right? So if you are concerned about the consolidation in the ag retail space, that also is a driver for why independents continue to exist and thrive, right? Is because of that. Hey, and I was an independent seedsman. So I lived in this world, and I had people that would buy seed from us, not because of price, not because of service, but because they wanted options. right? So that's a factor in that space of ag retail. I think that's why that kind of exists that way.
Yeah, you bet. Um, these next series of questions are related to the impending Viterra-Bunge merger, and I just want to make sure everybody's aware here. We only ask these questions to Western Canadian farmers because we felt that this was something that they would A, be more aware of, and B, likely be impacted by. So what you're about to see, the sample size gets a little bit smaller, and it's highly focused on this particular merger that's happening right now. So the first question was, how would you rate your overall level of concern with respect to the impending merger between Viterra and Bunge? And what you can see here is that 80% are concerned. So I mean, the concern over general concern over consolidation now transcends into this concern over a specific merger that is on the table right now. So that's one point. We then asked, in your opinion, do you feel that the merger should be allowed to proceed? And as you can see, 70% said no. So there are some relatively strong opinions about this, Sean.
Yeah. And this is very much in line with what I've heard from the Real Agriculture audience as this news broke. At the same time, for some in the grain industry, I've heard the comment that there's not a lot of overlap from a physical asset standpoint. So there's actually less. There's the perception of consolidation or perception of consolidation impact seems higher than what some of the grain industry people are saying in terms of what the realities are. But at the end of the day, perception wins, right? And so farmers clearly saying, and this is kind of the reason, Justin, why I think you and I started this whole program in the first place, was really to allow the farmer to provide clear, definitive positions on where they sit on a percentage basis, right? So it's easy for a talking head to go on the radio or go on TV and say, farmers are supportive of this or farmers are against it. Well, in this case, we know farmers are saying 70% of them saying this should not be allowed to proceed. Now, going back to the earlier slide, stronger teeth in the Competition Bureau. If it doesn't go ahead, is the Competition Bureau what gets in the way, or are there other factors? This is what we're all watching, and time will tell. But 80% being concerned, those two numbers tie in very much well together.
Do you think if you were to strip the names out of this and you just had big company A and big company B looking to merger people, you'd see the same result? Like, do you think it's more a matter of the big getting bigger?
In grain companies, I think people would have the same, yeah. And it's the same, but you would get the same thing, I think, if it was like, hey, do you want the small grain elevator a mile down from your farm to stay open? People have the same sort of response in terms of how potentially it impacts them. So yeah, I don't think the company names are the driver here.
Yeah. So in this case, we ask about the impact. We took a look at some different areas of impact that farmers could be concerned about, and we asked them to rate their level of concern over these items. So this was it wasn't presented as a scale, it was presented as statements. So not concerned, not very concerned, may or may not be concerned, somewhat concerned, or extremely concerned, and then those are assigned weightings so that we can calculate means. And so what we draw from this is that the biggest issue of most concern is having less options to market grain. And so on a scale of 1 to 5, being at a 4.19, that's pretty convincing right there. Very, very closely behind was poor basis and then lower prices. And so these top three, so to speak, were the main areas of concern. And we know that people are answering these questions honestly, because then you get some other areas. This was not a forced ranking or anything like that. We look at other areas like poor services or less convenience in doing business and unfair grading. These now fall into the threes. And so that leads us to believe it's still a concern, but it's not just as big of a concern as those first three that we presented you with there.
Yeah, and I think this kind of speaks to why that 90% of farmers are concerned about consolidation, is that we've heard that phrase before, that farmers they're really kind of price takers. They they're kind of in the middle. George Bush had a famous quote that is totally lost, or I've lost the top of mind, but that they want options. Okay, they want the ability to, and as there's more and more consolidation and less options, it actually takes away any leverage that they have, right? So I think this makes total sense that I want to get multiple bids. I want to hold, I may do a lot of business with the grain elevator A, but I want to be able to go to B and C and make sure I'm holding them honest, right? That's kind of, I think, what's sort of driving this here in this sense. It is kind of surprising because I think less options to market my grain is very tied to, the comments about grading, but there's a big gap there, right? Because the grading has especially in Western Canada, is a big factor on what the actual price is in the first place. So, lack of options definitely driving farmers' concern here when it comes to grain company consolidation.
Yeah. This last slide is simply showing the distribution of those responses. So, extremely concerned in the bright green and somewhat concerned in the minty green. And you can see, just how much concern there actually is. There's not a lot of neutrality on this at all. In fact, there's not a lot of neutrality in any of them. There's still a concern. It's just the degree of concern that exists there. So, yeah. So, Sean,
can we just hop back to the very first slide?
To the very first slide.
Yeah, very first one.
Okay, so we're going to go and rewind here. Sorry, everybody.
There we go. I just had an additional pieces of data that we saw in this 90% number, Justin. Mm-hmm. We saw that larger farms less concerned about consolidation than their smaller peers, and we also saw that farmers over the age of 55 more concerned about consolidation than their younger farming peers.
Yes,
was another piece of data out of that, and I think. In both those cases, the larger farms are actually experiencing consolidation themselves. So it might be a little bit, sort of the pot calling the kettle black if the largest farmers were really super concerned about consolidation. And the other thing is, I think farmers over 55, they would be a little bit more concerned because they've seen the deterioration of options. Right? Hey, I used to buy crop protection products from 12 different companies and now there's 4 like that, or 5, so that, I think it's that sort of experience that sort of feeds that sentiment. So a couple other interesting data points for everybody.
Yeah, you bet. I always think frame of reference needs to be taken into account, particularly when you look at the differences in responses based on age, because older people have a longer frame of reference than younger people do. And that likely influences results one way or the other.
And in the case of the specific merger that we chatted and asked farmers about in this case, there's what's more at play here too is, although Canadian farmers are impacted, when the global companies try to come together, right? We think about it as how does it impact the farm here? But the reality is that there's farmers around the world, and there's every country has its own version of the Competition Bureau that is looking and investigating on whether or not this should be allowed to proceed. So these decisions are made at much higher levels than just the domestic situation here in Canada.
So that is our report on the Concerns Over Consolidation survey. Thank you to the 593 farmers who took the time to answer these questions. We always appreciate the level of engagement that we get in these surveys, and please, if you've got friends who would be able to provide us insight, please, when you get the survey, pass it along, and the more the merrier for sure. So, Sean, over to you.
Yeah, if you have any feedback, you can email me, shaney@realagriculture.com, or of course you can check us out at RealAgristudies.com as well. And if you're seeing this video and you're not a part of the Real Agri Studies Insights panel, please go to that website, RealAgristudies.com, and register. The more the merrier, as we really tried to provide clarity on what's going through the farmer's mind, what's important to them, and what the opinions are really across the country of Canada. So on behalf of Justin and myself, everybody have yourself a great day, and we'll see you again soon.